Good Monday morning. I am Dan Kopp coming to you live from Madison, Wisconsin, and joining me, like always, is Ty Fershing. Good morning, Ty.
Good morning, Dan, and good morning, everyone else. My name's Ty. I'm coming to you live from Entebbe, Uganda. So, as usual, I'll say my disclaimer. The power and internet have a tendency not to be so good on this side in this country. So, if I fade away or disappear, Dan will take the ball and run with it until I come back on, hopefully.
Right on. Well, as you can see by the title on the screen, we are going to be talking about managing versus leading. But before we get into today's topic, let's talk about how you can get in contact with us. As always, our emails are at the bottom of the screen, dan@leadingbuffalo.com and tradesecrets.com. You can also feel free to DM us directly on LinkedIn, and you can also jump over onto YouTube to our Enhanced Leadership channel and check out all of our content. So again, if Ty happens to drop off, it's not because, he's having a medical issue. It is because because you said, if I drop off, it's because of the internet power, etc. I will try to maintain, and he will hopefully jump back on. So today's topic, managing versus leading. And to start us off today, Ty, take it away.
All right, Dan, thank you very much. Today's a great topic, and it centers on two things that people tend to just blend into one, and that's managing versus leading. And you can have a lot going on in your career, a lot going on in your position. But when is it managing and when is it leading? Is there a specific difference, or are they two completely different things? For me, I've always had the stance, you manage situations, you lead people. And so I'm just going to leave it there. And Dan, I'd like your intake from the Power of Me leadership and how you approach that statement.
Right. I really think I'm going to say the same thing you said, but I'm going to use different words. I think when I think of managing, I think of task oriented. And when I'm thinking of leading, I'm thinking about people oriented. So there's the difference in my mind. They are a bit ambiguous, though. When I talk to people and we talk about leadership and we train them, or I do keynote speaking, I talk about you can lead through both a management lens and a leadership lens. And that's how I help people differentiate it. So let's think about using one of the tenets we've discussed in the past, taking care of your people. Well, taking care of your people is a huge concept, right? But you can approach that as a leader through a management lens. So what does that taking care of your people look like as a manager? Well, if you've got decision-making authority in your organization, maybe it's the right compensation system. Maybe it's the correct benefits, the right paid time off, etc. All those things that are important to people, to your employees, but not necessarily leadership oriented. It's more management oriented. So you can take care of your people through a management lens, and then you can also take care of them through a leadership lens. What's that look like? Hey, we had a holiday last week. How was the break? Did you have fun? Did you do some Black Friday shopping? Whatever. You make small talk to get to know people. You check on people who you know are not doing well. This is a terrible time of year for a lot of people because of the holidays and family, etc. Ty, you and I both experienced that when we were in education. Some kids hate this time of year because they only have one parent, perhaps, or somebody died, or they're in foster care, or they have no money for presents, or parents are both working and the holidays are an afterthought, or maybe the home isn't a safe place. So you probably have people in your work environment too, as an adult, who have those same thoughts or same ideations about what the holidays mean. So get to know your people, talk to them, support them, celebrate with them if that's appropriate. But there's an example of how you can manage by taking care of people, and you can also lead by taking care of people.
Yeah, and that's a great integrative approach to taking care of your people, and I appreciate that. You had mentioned we both are in education. We're both in the military too, where holidays are kind of like wishy-washy because you either have family with you because especially when you're in a foreign country, or you are single and you're living in the barracks, and they try to do nice things, but it's not the same as family. And sometimes when you're done with the military, it's hard for you to get back into that family oriented thing where you go to see mom and dad, brothers and sisters, like that. And so it's that same dichotomy in the workplace, either from the lens of being in education, that the children have that issue, or as adults, you have that issue. So it's kind of interesting you brought that up because Thanksgiving just being last week, here I am in Uganda. What did I do? I had matoki and G-nuts, which is a local dish. I didn't really celebrate Thanksgiving, but I knew the importance of it. And I reached out, texted a couple people. That was it. That being said, you brought up a good point at the beginning because you said it's more systems when you're talking about managing. And I think systems and procedures is absolutely the right word to describe what a manager does. They take everything and make sure it just runs smoothly. Now, do they have to go into leadership mode? Well, let's define leadership. Leadership is not only about people, but it's about inspiring others, right? You aspire to lead by inspiring others, and that they will follow you. They will take heed to what you do. They see what you do. They say, yeah, I know that's who I want to follow, like that. So if you take both of those and combine it, and we could talk about the industry you're in too, because the industry means a lot too when it comes to managing and when it comes to leading. I'm going to borrow what you said last week, but I'm changing it here. Not all managers need to be leaders or are leaders or have the chance to be leaders, but all leaders are at some point in their career a manager, because they have to manage a situation, whether it's just a situation not dealing with people or whether it's a situation dealing with people. So I really like the way you put that out there.
Yeah, what comes to mind, I had a conversation with a high-level executive who worked for me several years ago. And he, in a very fine line between arrogance and confidence, arrogantly stated, "I'm not a manager, I'm a leader." I'm like, listen, dude, if your people are worried about payroll this week, whether or not we're going to do it correctly, or they don't have the right time off, or they don't like how we're compensating them, the procedure wise, like, you can lead all you want, but if we've got stuff that's wrong in the background because we haven't managed correctly, your leadership is irrelevant. So don't be captain leader. You've got to manage in order to lead effectively. The two are not exclusive of one another, and there's a fine line. Sometimes you're managing and all of a sudden leadership comes into that same decision. So you have to manage in order to lead. The two are intertwined, but big picture, I just keep going back to big picture when I'm thinking task oriented. Even if the task is correct, getting the correct benefits for the employees, that's still a task. I need to do that well, so when we have the right benefits, it's easier to lead because they're focused on the mission and our vision and not worried about whether or not they're going to be able to pay their dental bill. So there's the difference in my mind. The two are intertwined, and you've got to be a good manager in order to be an effective leader.
Yeah, absolutely. And because years ago, when Steve Jobs was in charge of Apple and they were hitting the high notes on everything, and then the board voted to remove him as CEO. And then I forget who they put in his place, but Apple went downhill for a while, for a couple years, if I'm not mistaken, until what they do? They brought back Steve Jobs. Now, why would they bring back Steve Jobs if the other guy was just perfect at his other job? I think he was in systems and everything in Apple. He was on the board, but they brought in a person who was awesome at, and this is the tech industry, right? You're awesome at systems and protocols and procedures. You're managing that. You don't really think about being a leader because sometimes the managers are just so good at what they do. They get rewarded for what they do. They really don't have to be a leader as long as they're making everything work. But sometimes you can't put that person into a leadership position because you need someone that can inspire. You need someone that has vision. And that's what Steve Jobs brought to Apple. Even though he got removed, they brought him back because we made a mistake, like that. So there's a perfect example of leadership versus systems. And if someone's out there, you can correct me wrong if the guy they brought in was purely systems. I don't remember, but all I know he was no Steve Jobs. He didn't have that vision. That I will argue till the cows come home.
Yeah. We talked about this concept a couple weeks ago regarding why is there lack of support for newly hired leaders. So picture in your scenario, you've got somebody who's risen through the ranks and is an exemplar of what a manager does. And going to the IT world, you manage the systems and everything's perfect. Now all of a sudden you're getting promoted. Now you're supervising 8 of what you used to do. But I'm a systems guy, and this is what I do. So when we promote people within, it's oftentimes, well, you did the system so well, and now there's 8 of you're supervising. You must know what you're doing. Go get them to do how well you did. But if you're not a leader and aren't into your EQ and your IQ aren't up to par in regard to what it takes to lead, you're sort of out there on an island by yourself, and the people that promoted you from within assume you can do it. Well, you were the best we've ever seen at this level. Now you're supervising the other 7 people. There's 8 of your supervisors. Why can't you get them to where they need to be? I got my own stuff to do. Good luck, Ty. You're in charge of those 8 people. Yeah, that's where the management and the leadership have to be prevalent. And leaders, we've talked about this before, when you have newly hired or newly appointed new leaders, you need to support them. For this is a prime example of that. Somebody, technical skills, great. Now they're moving up and all of a sudden they're leading people. Those are different skill sets. Doesn't mean they can't, doesn't mean they aren't great from out the gate, but being there's a support mechanism, a mentor and a coach, that is what is required of us when we're talking about managing and leading. Because my management skills may not be the best, but I've had team members who compensate for them. My leadership skills, I'm not perfect, but I also have teammates who make me better. So the same thought goes into that. If I hire somebody and promote them from the ranks and all of a sudden they're a leader, they might be great, but I still could be there as a sounding board if nothing else. So managing and leading, two totally different things, but they're definitely intertwined. And there's a definite line between the two, and at times it becomes blurry.
Yeah, absolutely. They hold hands sometimes.
Yeah,
that's the way I look at it.
Yeah.
And then at times they're just totally independent because, okay, let's get John to do this. He's the systems analysis guru. Let him handle it.
Right.
Doesn't have to deal with people. It's just the systems, get it back on track, and then we figure out what went wrong. Like that, because that's where people's expertise and their niche comes into play. People get rewarded for being efficiency experts. Doesn't mean they're a leader. It means they go right through and they decide, yeah, these are the systems that work, and this is what we do. Coming from an active personal engagement lens, for me, I really think that we've talked about this before, how active personal engagement, we're dealing with active discernment, which is basically decision making, taking into consideration your personal state and your values, right? So you have this encompassed idea and you're in alignment with yourself and what's true to your values. That is so important, even when you're a manager. But it becomes more important when you're a leader, because if you're doing everything and you're leading, which means you're leading, right? People have their eyes on you a lot more than they do a manager. And if you're leading and you lead with your integrity, you lead with your values, you're comfortable with what you're doing, your personal state, you don't have high blood pressure, because that's what happens if you bottle it up. If your values and personal state aren't aligned and you're making decisions that contradict that, you have an issue. And that issue basically boils down to self-preservation. What am I doing now? Or your health. What's good for me? What's good for my people beneath me? What's good for the company? What's good for the organization? Now throw in your power of me leadership tenets, keeping that value alignment, then that's the whole inspiration, because people see that authenticity in the actionable things that you can do. And I'll let you speak to that because I think it's so cool how they both intertwine, and they actually hold hands together too, Ape and the buffalo, right?
Oh yeah. Being beyond reproach, letting your actions speak for themselves. So you could go out as a leader and say, I'm here for you. I support you. What do you need, Ty, to get your job done? Good job. You rah rah, right? But then in the background, if I'm not leading and also being authentic and taking care of my people by giving them the right benefits, the right time off, etc., they're going to say, yeah, this guy's a sort of an idiot. He comes out here and tells us he's here to support us, and then he pays us poorly. And I'm not suggesting you go above market. I just suggest you pay people for what value they're bringing to your organization. So if you're on a longevity-based system, you're probably not doing it right, quite honestly, because it's not all about longevity. It's important, but not everything. So your actions as your words and actions as a leader need to mirror your words and actions as a manager. And I want to back up a second, Ty, what you said about people are watching you as a leader. As a manager, it just became clear to me when you said that. As a manager, and let's go back to the IT world. They come, Ty, you're in charge of IT for the organization. For whatever reason, all the printers are down today. Ty, that is a task. What went wrong? Fix that task. 100% focused on the task and the fact that the printer isn't broken. Isn't working. It's a very tangible thing. Now, Ty's promoted a year later. People aren't going to worry about whether or not the printers are going when they think of Ty. They're thinking about whether he's a good guy or not. Does he take care of us? Does he treat us well? Does he know our jobs? Does he support us, etc.? That's 100% about Ty versus the tasks. And I think that really brought it clear in my mind, the difference between leadership and managing. If you're just in a staff position doing your thing and you're dotting your I's, crossing your T's, you're the best there is, period. And people aren't going to, fault you. Done. Everything's correct. But then you become the leader. Everybody is watching every step you take, every move you make, and they hear every word you utter. So, and it's not any longer about the task or the system. It's about you as a human being. And that's a hard thing for a lot of people to be comfortable with, because they're like, oh, it's just uncomfortable to be scrutinized, everything you do, say, and think, for crying out loud. Because it should match, all those things should match who you are at your core. So they're in essence attacking your core, who you are. So I think that sums up the difference in my mind. It's task versus human being between the two.
Yeah, and then what do you do when you have a manager who's good at what they want to do, but they want to do more? And I think the answer to that is make sure what you're doing is what you like to do, because that way everything's going to be in alignment. I don't know how many people, my father said to me once, my father never talked about business to me. He said to me once, when I was teaching, right? And I told you, I love teaching. I never woke up a day and said, man, I don't want to go to work today. Never. And my dad looked at me and goes, you are so blessed to have a job that you like. And I go, but I like it because I'm helping people. He goes, and that's what's the blessing, is you like to help people. And this comes from a guy who was a salesman all his life, didn't particularly care for being anything else. And he made money. Don't get me wrong, because he was a salesman and he's one of the best. But he didn't really enjoy it a lot of times. He just did it because he knew what he needed to do to get the task done. I teased him once. I go, look, I saw the high school students. Okay. Like that. So I think the idea is, if you're aligned in your personal state and you're aligned in your values and you're showing that as you're doing the management work that you do, that people are going to take notice below you and above you. And when you have that transition to a leadership position, it's going to be a lot smoother, because you don't have it's not like everything's all eyes on you all of a sudden, because the eyes were already on you because they knew who you were.
Right. So I have two final thoughts, or one final thought that's sort of looking at it two different ways. If you're a manager, you can still lead from where you are. You've got people above you, below you, and beside you in the organization, and you can still lead. If you're a leader, you must also manage. It's a requirement of the job. And if you aren't also managing, you've got problems on your hands. Even if you're delegating and you're delegating appropriately, not because of stuff you don't want to do, but it's stuff you're delegating to your trusted people that you're supervising. That great, because you've trained them to the point where you can delegate, trust them to get it done. So that is still actively managing. So if you're a manager, you can lead. If you're a leader, you must manage. There's, in my mind, that's where it comes from.
Yeah, I agree, because there's certain times where you have to have the experience of managing as a leader. And as I said before, not all managers are leaders, but every leader is a manager. At some point in their career, they're going to be a manager.
Has to be. Some people don't want to be, but they have to be. It's a requirement of the job, in my opinion. All right. Well, that wraps up another conversation. Ty and I don't practice these things before we talk, because we want to see where the discussion takes us. And we're always pleased at the end because of things that one or the other of us said, like, oh, I didn't even think of it that way. And so this was raw. Our thoughts, we just talked about the topic, and there we are. So that's the best way to do leadership, in my opinion, is to feel your way through it. And because it can never be scripted, just like this discussion we're having. So we're going to sign off. Again, you can reach out to us on via our emails at the bottom of the screen, Dan@leadingbuffalo.com and Ty@tradesecrets.com. You can also DM us on LinkedIn or jump over on YouTube and check out our Enhanced Leadership channel. So this is Dan and Ty. We're talking about enhanced leadership, and you can do it. Good luck.
Take care, everyone.